welcome to the last class of the workshop. We're going to be reviewing prototyping today. And yeah, thanks as always. We keep receiving very nice comments about the workshop and very interesting questions, so thank you for that. We had a couple of interesting questions last week. I think it came from the sales group, which I think is interesting. The first one was about flowcharts and sitemaps, which we reviewed on our last session. This one's talking about developing flowcharts require time. Should they be created in the pre-sales stage? Just so you guys know, we call it the pre-sales stage when we are trying to entice a prospect, right? We're trying to understand what they want, but we're also trying to give an interesting proposal, making sure we show that we understand what they're looking for. And part of that, I think, involves doing these kinds of deliverables right off the bat. So, and obviously I'm not the director of the sales department, so maybe I don't have an official stance on this, but my answer as the designer is yes, we should do these at the pre-sale stage because they help everyone on the team understand the main roles, permissions, and goals the users will have in relation to the product. But they don't need to be like entirely detailed at this point. We don't need to cover absolutely all of the interactions that they're going to have, but only enough to help make sense out of their general requirements, because this in turn helps everyone estimate the efforts for a project, right? But it's true as well, like user flows take some time, but the exercise itself could help avoid scope creeping if the project comes through. This means that if this helps us understand the product better and estimate it without having us go over the scope when the project is actually in place, I think it's for the benefit of everyone, right? For the company and the client. So I think it was the related question. Should flowcharts be developed by processes according to user roles or according to modules? Or what is the most recommended to develop in the pre-sale stage? This is an excellent question. And I think it can be seen like this. User flows are usually seen from the perspective of the user as they try to accomplish a task. So what I would recommend, just as a short answer, is to do the following. First of all, before doing any sitemaps or user flows, you need to define who your users are and the roles that they have within the system, right? Second one, define the goals they'll pursue and the tasks they'll perform. Number three, establish a basic sitemap, how many and what sections according to the tasks that we already discovered, and defining some basic user flows specifically for the most important tasks in relation to the roles, okay? These four steps can be done on either a pre-sale stage or an early research and ideation phase within our user-centered design process, right? But on the pre-sale stage, again, I want to emphasize that this can be done without a lot of detail, but at least it's going to give us a better picture of the project that we are about to undertake. And just as an example, because I think this is an excellent question, let's do another exercise again, maybe closer to home, okay? So all of you guys, or maybe most of you, know what Connect is. This is our HR, administrative management, web application that we use internally to manage resources, to manage projects, allocations, contracts, part of the recruiting, some of the recruiting tasks as well. So let's make the case for the sales group. So let's say we start off with this hypothesis, which can be a requirement for management. WebCreek's sales group want to create a module in Connect that allows them to add sales prospects, upload proposal documents, and have supervisor and management approve or reject the documents before they are submitted to potential clients. So with this sort of story we have here, we can already define the first step that we were talking about, right? Which is defining the users and their roles. So for what we can see, we have at least three, which are the sales executive, the supervisor, and management. And what are their like goals and tasks overall? Again, this could be done on a pre-sale stage and very quick and to the point, right? Without too much detail. The sales executive wants to add prospects, submit proposal documents for approval, while the supervisor reviews those documents and approves the scoping details, while management reviews the documents and approves pricing. Okay, so as we move things along, we can think about the next point, which is the sitemap, right? So let's assume the application doesn't have a lot of sections so far, or maybe this role is only going to have access to this particular module, and we can divide it like this, right? We have, let's say we have a version of Connect that's just for sales. So the people from sales are going to be able to see contacts, right? That's what we learned from the story. Proposals. They're going to be able to see their user profile. They're going to have notifications. This is a very basic understanding, right? But we can already assume that we're talking about adding, managing, approving. We might have different statuses and different versions of those units of information. So if we think about contacts, we can already take it like another step and say, yeah, maybe we can have leads. Sorry for the typo here. We have prospects and we have clients. These are like contacts, but they answer to a different category. And for proposals, maybe we have the new proposals, the ones that were rejected and the ones that were already presented. This is just an example, but we can start with this hypothesis, especially for a pre-sale stage. And obviously this helps clients confirm that this could be the case as well. So when we're facing a user flow, and again, this could be done on a pre-sale stage, this is sort of like a different layer that you can add to user flow from what we saw last week. And this is related to things we call swim lanes, which can give you even a bigger picture of how these flows don't only answer to one single user and their actions, but how their actions can relate to other roles. And this is the case for applications like Connect. You do something, it affects another role or it affects another user. So in this case, you can see we have the three roles, right? We have management, we have supervisor, and we have sales executive. So user flows are sort of like a timeline of actions that happens one after the other. So the sales executive is the one that's going to start it, because let's talk about the actions in general. They add prospects to the system. So when they relate the proposal to that prospect, they can submit a document for review. Bear in mind that we're not talking about user interface yet. We're talking about goals, we're talking about tasks, and we can represent this afterwards. So the moment where the submission is done, at the same time, the supervisor receives a notification saying, hey, sales executive, this could be Ale, for example. Ale supervisor receives a notification say, hey, Alejandro Ortega uploaded a proposal document for review, right? And the supervisor has to review and approve the scope, right? Which is what we learned from the story as well. So they review the document and they have options to either approve it or not. If it's not approved, it's rejected and it goes back to the submission stage. But if yes, then you remember the story mentioned it must have a higher approval because management is the only one that's going to approve it from the budget perspective. So when it is approved, then they receive a notification later on. They review the document, and only when they approve it in full, because it was previously pre-approved by the supervisor, let's say, you can get formal approval notifications for the other two roles, and that's the end of having a document being approved, right? So, and if it's not approved, you have a reject notification, and it actually goes back to the sales executive to review, because it has to go through the entire flow again, right? There are a lot of details that you can keep adding to the user flow, but we have to be conscious of a balance between having these very simple, but trying to explain the most without going crazy into, yeah, I click on the tab, I click on the button, I upload a document, I review the screenshot. I think the user flows are a brief exercise. Again, they don't have to be simple. They don't have to be pretty, sorry. They have to be useful. So in this case, this doesn't take a lot of time. This particular user flow was done in Google Slide. And I want to remind everyone that most of what you're going to see, the deliverables that we are working on this workshop, you can do it even without tools like XD, which are a little more advanced. So this is just an example of that. All right. So what we're going to review today from what we learned last week. Now, ideally, we're going to have an exercise where we have a story that already has a sitemap, already has its users, and we're going to just start prototyping, which is the final stage of the design. Let's say the pre-final stage of the design before we evaluate it, which is prototyping. And you have 3 levels of fidelity within prototyping. And we're going to work on low, mid, and high fidelity. And each of these we're gonna do with 3 different techniques or tools, if that makes sense. So low fidelity, we're going to approach it with basic hand sketching. I'm going to do it in Photoshop with a tablet I have here with a digital pencil, but you guys can do it on your notebooks. You can do it on a whiteboard. It serves the same purpose. In case of mid fidelity, we're going to do it with Google Slides, and with high fidelity, we're going to go straight to Adobe XD. So you know, so like that final step. Maybe not all of you are going to get to do that. You can explore it definitely, but this is just another way to show the capabilities of the application and how you can actually add that level of fidelity to have a final product in the sense of a prototype. So what is a prototype? It's basically a simulation or a sample version of a product that enables you to test your ideas and designs before you actually invest time and money to develop the actual product. This is created after the research and the ideation phase, as we saw on our user-centered design framework. Is in the actual design phase, which is the phase number 3. And how do we do this? We actually just draw or create shapes that represent images with different levels of fidelity, as we're going to see. And that allows us to simulate functionality too. So like represent how the product's going to behave and how it's going to work. Why? Why do we do this? They basically allow you to iterate, refine, rework, and make improvements until you have a market-ready product that you can actually develop. This is an image I shared, I think it was in session number 3. And this is when we're talking about fidelity, okay? All of these can be construed as prototypes because you're testing ideas, you're putting them to the perspective of analysis. So low fidelity can be considered like, again, a hand sketch that we're going to do right now. When you keep adding, making it fancier, making it a little more detailed, you can have medium fidelity. And as you can see, we are going from like lines that represent text to actual text that you can already test and see how long does it have to be. Maybe you need a title and a paragraph or things like that. And as you keep adding detail, this is probably a very high jump, but the high fidelity answers to the process you had before, right? Where you're adding colors, where you're adding the logos, you're in image. And this is actually what developers have to implement, what the clients should expect the product to be, and what you can test with users because it's basically the thing they're going to see at the end. So let's jump right in to the prototyping exercise with the story again. This is coming from either a research process, or it's coming directly from a client or a hypothesis of your own, right? As we've been discussing, pairing clients' requirements with user research is the ideal way to do this. But for the sake of the exercise, let's say this was presented from the client's perspective. And they were saying to us, as a user, I want to log into a mobile application with my credentials. If I don't remember my password, I want to have a way to reset it. If I'm a new user, I don't have any credentials, I want to create an account and be able to access the application. Okay, so this is the stage where we're gonna do. We know some of the things that have been happening, and going back to our process. You guys remember we started working on this. I made it a little nicer because diagrams.net kind of took the best out of me on doing the arrows the right way. But this is basically the same story represented as a user flow. Okay, and what we're looking at is that the user is starting at the login screen, and according to the story, they have 3 options basically, 3 options of action. They can either log in, they can register, or they can reset their password because they forgot it. Okay, so it's very straightforward. We talked about this. If you log in and you have valid credentials, and that's a yes, you access the product, and that's the end of this task. But if not, you can either approach registering or forgetting the password, whatever works for your case. In the case of the registering, if the next thing I do, I just fill out the registration form, and then I confirm the account. I put this in gray so it's understood maybe that this is not happening within the application. You received an email, and whenever you're clicking or tapping on that link, you get the success prompt, and you're prompted to log in with your new created credentials. Okay, but if you got your password, then you need to enter your email address, the one that you used to register in the beginning. And again, you receive something on your email outside the application, the recovery link, as we call it. Then you go back to the application where you can reset your password, and then you have a success again, and you're prompted to login flow as well. Okay, so this could already be a sprint, and this is actually what happens with Scrum, as most of you might have heard on other projects, and how to structure the agile methodologies that we use is that we already have users, roles, actions that we can start to think about and that we can already implement, for example, in the sprint, right? And by that end, we already have some screens that need to be prototyped for the developers, testers, users, and clients get to see and get to validate or get to work on, right? There are plenty of screens that we can prototype here. I can think of at least 10 or 12 that will relate to everything about this. The login screen, the registering form, the emails, the success screen, the validation of credentials. There are a lot of them that we can start to work. But we're going to focus on the spirit of time. Obviously, we're going to focus on 3. Okay, and the first one is our login screen. So let me connect this real quick. Okay, so this is Photoshop. I insist that this can be done on a notebook, so it doesn't really matter. And what we're doing here is just basically exploring how this can be structured without too much detail, right? So there are a couple of elements, basic elements that you would need to see that maybe just remember for the sake of best practices, I guess, is that, let's say, I want my logo at the top and I want an image maybe at the top. This is terrible, I'm sorry, but at least it gives us an idea, okay? So, okay, if you have, let me do this better actually. So, if you want to represent an image, we use boxes that are crossed with diagonal lines. And what you're seeing here is that I have an image and I want to have my logo on top of that, right? Now, this is the login screen, so I want to have 2 fields for the username and the password. I want to have a button that's for logging in. Specific. Then I want to have a button maybe to register, and maybe just a link to forgot. Okay, that's good enough. So maybe I can just add a color to say one of the things that we're going to prototype next. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the next screen I'm going to have when I'm registering, and the one that I'm going to have when I click on forgot image. And we're not going to prototype the flow of this, but when we prototype like the immediate image, the screen that you're going to see as you tap that. So we define that when you click on register, you would have a form to fill, right? So let me copy this actually. So let's say we have a form You don't necessarily have to add that level of text or anything like that. So let's say it's just a form. And whenever I fill that information, I'm ready to basically create my account. So, yep. A couple of things to note is that I do need to go back if I'm prompted to another screen. I can add a label to show the user where they're at, but they also have the arrow to go back. Actually, we can, at this stage, we can even suggest these kinds of things, but it's simple for now. So, and what happens when I click on forgot? I think it's very simple, actually. I just need a way to recover the form. So maybe I'm just going to pretend that this is an overlay, maybe. And what I'm going to do is just to say here, I have a window. Actually, this is easier done by hand, so don't worry about this. So what I want to say here is that this is the place where I'm gonna basically just do the recovery. I'm gonna put my email. I'm gonna say just recover. Okay, and this is it pretty much. Usually sketches are not meant to be shown to clients. They're usually can help trigger the discussion internally, and you can for sure all of you might be able to do this in a better way. Actually, by hand, I find it a little more comfortable. But we already have 3 screens that make sense, that comply with the requirements, that are part of our user flow, and we can start adding some fidelity to this. Okay, so after you finish your sketch, depending on the time that you have for the project, you can add some fidelity to it. As you can see, this would be the mid fidelity stage, if that makes sense. So what we're doing here is just basically polish the idea, right? As you guys saw, we didn't have the actual text. Everything is kind of quote unquote sketchy, and there's not much to understand from this other than the real basics. But now we take it a little step further and we say, oh, okay, this is going to be a form, a button, a secondary button, a link, and organized it nicely. And whenever I click on things, you can connect them. You can still add the little red arrows that we're adding, but for the sake of time, I actually made progress with this. But this is done with Google Slides. Actually, I took the same frame as you guys saw in the sketch. You can find this online if you click on iPhone or mobile phone wireframes. You're gonna see this, and you can copy and paste them and just click on things and work on top of them. Okay. Actually, I was able to simulate this overlay, which is basically a copy of the first one for the recovery email. And yeah, it's just a basic pop-up with the field and the button. So I think we can all understand what is going on here more. You already start to think about the actual text, the actions, and some additional details that users are going to be able to interact with, right? So now that we have our sketch, which is a low fidelity idea, we added more details. Now we have a mid fidelity idea about this. And everyone is on board, ideally, with this. And actually, that is the whole purpose of those, that you can analyze it with your team, with the client. Actually, mid-fidelity prototypes can be presented to clients depending on the time, depending on the actual client. And you can say, like, does this make sense? Perfect. Now we can prototype in high fidelity with confidence. So now that we are here in XD, yeah, let's get right on it. I'm going to create on the left on the toolbar, I'm going to create selecting the artboard option. On the right, where the property should be, I already have a set list of sizes and dimensions. So I'm going to check, let's try an iPhone 6, 7, 8 Plus, which is very common. As we were looking on the initial sessions, you can double click on the title of the artboard and say, let's do here the login. Actually, I'm going to create the other three just to have it handy. I dragged it with Alt, or you can create it the same way I did it. So this is register. And we have the recovery. Yeah. So again, to have it handy as well, I downloaded a couple of illustrations online that maybe fit the brand, the style. And this is the logo from our client. It's obviously fictional, but it's called Study Time. So let's remember how this one looked. So I have a logo and an image at the top, right? So I cut it with Command or Control X. I placed it here. And remember, when we had the elements floating around, you have these anchor points that you can, if you're pressing Shift, whenever you're dragging, you can change the scale proportionally. In this case, I just want to place it here, a little smaller. If you want to change sizes manually, you can do it from here. I'm going to put the lock to make it proportional as well. So it's exactly 200. That kind of helps developers sometimes make things exact, so it's always a good idea. So yeah, it's 200 exact. And they want to have an image, but maybe the client, I don't know, things work better with illustrations, I guess. So maybe I took one of them and I added to it. So maybe can overlap. Looks nice. Okay, so now we have our header good to go. And now we have to create 2 fields, 2 buttons, and a forgot password. I'm going to go back to the left on my panel of shapes and tools. I'm going to select the square. I'm going to drag and create something that resembles a form, a field, sorry. So let's keep doing these accurate. So let's say 300 by 48. That makes sense. And actually, let's do it round. I think because of the illustration and the logo and the subject, I think it looks friendlier. That's fine. So as you guys saw, like the square, you can make these rounded by just having these little circles defined on the corners of the shape. You can drag them inside, and it will change the shape. Let me show this real here. Okay, or you can change it on the properties panel again here on appearance below the actual. This is called blending modes, but this one here you can select 50. That will make it entirely round. Okay. Now I'm gonna add just a basic text, which is username. Right? If it makes sense prior to this, you can already start to define. Hey, the logo is using the Poppins font. We're going to use Poppins for this as well. 20, it's a little large. Maybe we can reduce it to 14. We're going to align it on the properties to the left. Remember, you have all the guides to align things into center and do things nicely. So we're going to change this to a lighter gray because it's not filled out. It's just a suggestion for now. I'm going to group this. I'm going to drag with Alt and Shift so that it stays put. I'm going to give it, as you can see, I'm going to give it 8 points of separation. Maybe let's do a 10 for this experiment. And I'm going to change this to, say, the password. Okay. So let's separate it a little further. Let's do 16. That's good. Okay. You can see we're halfway there. We need a couple of buttons and a link. And actually, I'm going to push this a little up so that we have enough room. And I'm going to use the same shape actually to be consistent and do the buttons. So in this case, what I'm going to do is just on the properties panel, select that I don't want a border, just want this to be maybe black. I don't know if it works. So another thing you can do here in color is you have a picker that if you select it, it's sort of like a magnifying glass that allows you to pick any color that's anywhere actually. So why don't we try the green one, which I think is kind of cool. Yeah, that works. So in this case, it's not a field. So buttons tend to have things centered. So I'm going to center that text. I'm going to change it to white. It's kind of light, the text, right? So it's kind of hard to see. So I'm going to change the weight of the text and make it bold. All of it's here in the property section, as you guys saw. And now I'm going to have a secondary button that's called register. It's fine. So I can keep adding things. Same separation, hopefully. And yeah, but I don't want this to be filled. I want it just to have an outline. And I want to pick the same green color I had. Here on the size, I'm going to make it a little bolder. And I'm going to keep picking that color. Another handy thing that you can do is whenever you're here at the color stage, you have this plus icon here. You can add colors and have this already available instead of picking, right? So if you want to just change the color, you can pick it here, you can change it there. And in this case, I'm going to say this is register. Oh, sorry, this was not password, this is login. That's good. Okay. So, and I'm going to basically add a link at the bottom that is less important. And actually, we can pick, maybe let's try this color blue to make this a little different. I'm going to save it. As I was showing you. There we go. Okay. This is going to be my forgot password. All right. That's it. We can keep working on this. There are plenty of stuff I'm sure we can do. And but this is our screen right there. So I think it's working. And actually, I think it could be nicer. Maybe let's change this color real quick to blue. There you go. I think this reads better. It looks more like a button. I think it works here. Okay, cool. So we have our first screen together. Let's do a registration real quick. I'm gonna go, it's gonna be basically the same thing, right? I'm gonna keep copying and pasting these components. And I'm just copy two more so I can do my form. And let's say I have here, let's see what my mid-fidelity prototype is saying. Name, email, password, and confirm password. Fine. So name, email, password. Instead of login. Funny thing about these actions is that, for instance, at a certain point, you're going to be able to say, hey, I don't want to just connect it with Facebook and Gmail. Yeah, then that's something you need to consider when you're doing the flow as well, because for registration, then you won't not only have a field registration form, you might be able to have Gmail, Google, or Facebook accounts. Use to create your account, right? But this is not the case so far. I'm going to use the forgot password again, and I'm going to do that to just put here the register button. Sorry, the register label that's telling me where I'm at. And I'm going to just create a simple arrow super quickly. I'm going to perhaps create a line with the line tool on my left. I'm going to have it be blue. And let's do it very thick. I'm going to create a small triangle as well with another one of those tools. Okay. You can download icons and do things differently if you want. It's just a quick example, but yeah, I think that works for now. Color, that's it. Okay, so according to this, we're good. I think that the screen ended up a little plain. So why don't we use another illustration here at the bottom? to make it look branded, to make it look cooler, right? You'll actually note that if you place elements here, it doesn't matter if they're like larger than the artboard, they're gonna be cropped like immediately for you to see like this, okay? So actually this looks nicer, and we have the font a little up to the screen, okay? Cool. And now we only have the recovery pop-up to do. And what's fun is that in this case, I'm going to copy the exact login screen again, because what I was proposing is this is a pop-up. So what I want to do is create a block of color at the top with a square, actually. I'm going to remove the border. I'm going to do it blue. And in the appearance part of the panel, I'm going to change the transparency. Let's keep it at 32. And now I'm going to do another block to represent the actual pop-up window. Okay. So this is just a square again. I'm going to take the border out, leave it white. And since we're all rounded everywhere, I'm going to add this as 24, and the pop-up is rounded now. Okay, so remember we keep reusing things. So now I'm going to have the email, just the email and the reset password. I think I want to change that text as well because it didn't make much sense, but we're going to do that now. So enter. And instead of what we had here, reset password, yeah, we can change it here. So send. Okay. And remember, we had a couple of text here and there. So now I'm going to use the text tool to draw a square, maybe the width of the field on the button. Start typing the message I want my user to. I want to give my user to help him understand what he needs to do here. Please enter your email. Okay. Center this, like this, and you guys can see it's kind of tall. So let's make it not that tall. We can make it a little fatter as well. Okay. And how do I get out of this? Usually you can tap outside of it, but I think it's a good practice to add some button that you can actually see to go out. And I'm going to do an X icon here. There are better ways to do this for sure, but just I see we're running out of time. So I'm going to do something similar as the arrow, do the diagonal, I'm going to copy it, and basically when you rotate it 90 degrees here, and then we have our X to just go out, right? And could be better. You can actually download icons from a different library and use them here. But yeah, just for the sake of speed, yeah, we basically did a whole lot in a couple of minutes. Obviously, with practice, you're going to be able to do it that way. But now the last step of this is that this is not an interactive prototype yet, and this is what Adobe XD gives us, right? So remember we were talking about this top bar at the beginning when we were looking at the interface basics. So let's go to the second tab, which is called prototype. And here you notice we don't have any creation tools anymore, and the properties are changing. So we're not going to delve a lot on this, but we're going to just connect stuff. Okay. So on our screen at the beginning, we want to connect this button of register to the actual screen that we're looking at. So if you select that button, you're going to see this little blue circle here. You're just going to click it and drag it to the screen that makes sense to you, which is this one. Now I remember we want to go back as well. So I want to have this arrow go back to the login screen. We're going to do the same with the forgot password. And we're going to do the same with the X that goes back to the original image. Okay. So if I select this artboard and on the same bar, I click on the play button at the top right, This is already a perspective of what you're going to be able to see in your browser. So take a look. We have our login screen. What happens if I go over the register? I already see the connection being made, the hand's there. So I go to register and I can go back, right? And this is basically the principle of working XD. There are a lot of things you can do in terms of transitions, animations, effects, and organizing things better with components and that whole thing, but that's something you can learn in time. But for now, you can do this and connect things seamlessly. Let's try the forgot password, which should be working as well. That's it. Whenever you're clicking it, you get prompted with a pop-up and you close it, right? So this is already showing high fidelity prototype interactions, and it doesn't take a whole lot there. Even if you use illustrations and resources that make sense, things can come together very quickly. And again, with practice, this is not extremely hard to do. What I think it takes more time is the research part and understanding users and working ourselves to that logic that helps understand how things should work, how users would feel with certain design decisions and things like that. But for now, this is a start with the tool. And the last thing is that on the third tab on the share section of the interface, you have an option here where you can say create link. This is the important part, right? Because when actually the free version allows you to only create one, but I think it's enough because you can manage it. If you have different projects, you can remove it, or I don't know. There are ways to do that. But overall, if you create a link here with either type of account, the prototype gets published to Adobe's cloud spaces. And now you generated a URL that if you click on it, you're going to be able to see the links that the creative team usually shares with all of you, right? Well, in this case, it was the same document where we included the sitemap and the user flows. But if you navigate it through, you have your screen here, and it has the same interactions we just assigned to it. Let's look at it in full screen. And it works the same way. And actually, the fun thing about this was since we did a mobile application, you can send this link to a mobile phone and you can look at it from that scale. This is the important point where you get to test and evaluate with users, with clients, and making sure that requirements are understood. And after that's done, developers and testers, for instance, have a very strong reference of what they should do. Okay? So that's pretty much it. I apologize for the speed. Maybe some things we're missing. Remember, these sessions are saved and are published on our YouTube channel. We're going to share the links soon. And hopefully we get to do more workshops in the future to give more detail to this for the people that actually want to pursue more knowledge on UX and design. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to learn about this, to listen to what I have to say, to the content that was being displayed. Hopefully it was useful for you. This is the last session as we were discussing. I want to share real quick a survey link that will help this group keep creating workshops that are valuable for everyone. So when at your convenience, please fill out that rating form so that we get your feedback. They're all anonymous, so please take it away. Add any words, and feedback is most welcome. And hopefully we get to do this more often. So yeah, I think we have some 5 minutes for some closing lines and questions. Before we dive into the questions, just 1 minute, and in the sense of summarizing what UX might mean for a lot of people. And one of the indirect goals that I had with this workshop is to show everyone that UX is in specific is such a wonderful creative specialty that it is very open to everyone to access. You know, there's a lot of information and there's a lot of different skills where people can shine, and not necessarily from the visual perspective. As we were discussing on the first session, there are room for people that like to research. There are room for people that like to do, I don't know, user testing, people that enjoy talking about the logic and information architecture. There's also room for the visuals. There's room for implementing the front end. As even one of you guys is a backend developer. There are things you can include and incorporate to your own engineering background from the UX perspective. So there are a lot of things that are coming back and forth, and this is very interesting to me because it's an ever-changing career. There are a lot of things happening daily. I would like to believe it's a well-paid, it's a competitive career nowadays. There are a lot of like corporations like Google, Facebook, startups that are constantly looking for this type of talent. And it takes time, consistency to learn things and to master things, but you can change careers. You can start from scratch, and you can make a lot of progress in a very short amount of time if you like what you're doing, obviously, and if you find a good path of learning as well. But I think there are a lot of opportunities. So I encourage everyone to, if you want to pursue these kind of career, it's very flexible, and I really wish you the best, because it's amazing, and you're going to have a lot of opportunities here. So thanks again. Thanks everyone. And so I don't know if anyone has any questions. We can go over them in the next couple of minutes.
Just
Pedro, you go ahead. You go ahead, Jonathan. Go.
Thanks. Are the slides going to be shared with us, or just like the video?
No, both. You're going to have access both to the slides, to the videos, and that's one additional thing from Jonathan that reminded me. Next week we're going to prepare the test that you guys are going to have to take. I'm going to have fun with that one. Honestly, there's a lot of interesting content that hopefully will not be super easy for you. Hopefully it will be interesting that you guys review the content, take a look at the questions, and it's challenging for you all. But yeah, we're gonna share the slides, the videos, and you're gonna have access to the test soon to wrap things up.
Thanks.
Sure.
Pedro, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. This is a complete area that I didn't have a lot of knowledge before I got the opportunity to work on a project about UX design. But my last question would be, what would be the most challenging thing that you think you had to face when you were like a junior, where, now you're a pro, but most of us are juniors. So what would be the thing that was the most challenging case or a scenario you faced?
I think one word came to mind, which I would say it's bias. Your own bias and the client bias is what sort of like interferes with doing all of the things that we've been discussing. Years ago, as we've been discussing throughout the entire workshop, UX is relatively new in terms of years. I guess it's been around 7-8 years. As a concept, it has been present way longer. But even then, when I started, there was a lot of skepticism of how these things work and they generate value, because as Ali was asking us this week, like, these things might take time, and I think the friction between trying to push these type of work, instead of like going straight into thinking only on requirements, only on the visuals, this is where it starts to get tricky, because you sometimes you're prompted to do this from the get-go. You haven't done research, you don't understand requirements, you haven't talked to users, client barely gives you instructions, and you start to assume a lot. So I think that leads you to potentially be that way as well, like trying to use things from your own perspective, which are not necessarily to the benefit of the product. So I think it comes back to what I was saying in regards to user research. The beauty about this career, in my opinion, is that it allows you to go outside of what your own experience is like. You can talk to others, learn from others, and understand how things work for others than yourself. So that is challenging at the beginning because, again, I think what's most famous is that you're pushed to deliver this kind of thing right off the bat. But there's the process is not for the sake of fanciness, it's for the sake of understanding things, of making sense out of something that you don't know about. And this is where your bias comes to play again, because you have, even as designers, for example, we have our own egos, and those are very hard to overcome. And that is the over exercise that at the beginning it's very uncomfortable. It's the friction that you have to have your points across, and trying to make sure you follow a certain process that gives you the answers, And but yeah, I mean, I think with time, there are occasions, clients, and projects that are from different nature. So, but at the beginning, it's a surprise because you're prompted with challenges that you might know how to face, but eventually they work out. And again, doing this, any of this, like if you just work a basic sitemap, and you don't do the user flows, you don't do the research, at the very least, if you focus on doing this just for yourself, you're already improving the chance of that product making more sense and working better, which is ultimately our job. So that's what I have to say. This initial friction on trying to get things through and understanding how things work, it's sometimes a little difficult, but it always works out.
Awesome. Thanks for your opinion.
Thank you, Jody. Anyone else?
Pedro, how do you prevent that bias? Like, for example, when I'm working for the Schlumberger project, I find that often I don't do what's more accurate or even what's best for the project, but what's easier for me, or when I'm pressured with time, what's faster. And on the other hand, when I have too much time, it's the complete opposite. I have so much time that I keep changing little things and again and again and again and again, so much that at the end, I stop seeing what it's real and start seeing what I want to see, and I have to ask someone else, like, "Hey, can you check this? What do you think about this?" So yeah, how can we prevent that bias?
I think you answered it yourself. I think doing research with others, sharing stuff with others, is the only way to confront your own bias. Because when you do things on your own and you think, like, you streamline your thought as the only source of answer, that is where we're probably going to fail. And okay, there's also the extreme that you're not going to find all the answers right away, right? This is not about doing the perfect product and doing the ultimate research, so it's absolutely flawless. That is not the case. Like, user-centered design is about a game. I would say, like, a game of chances, if you may. Like, the more you research, the more you talk to others, the more you put your ideas to scrutiny, it's gonna help you validate. It's gonna show you different things. It's gonna show you ideas, instead of not doing that and risking the ultimate result, right? So again, it's about just testing things as quickly as possible. And for example, Jose, in your case, if you're doing a storyboard in Google Slides and you're putting it up for review to someone that is, I don't know, an expert or something like that, you're already improving the chances of your project, of your initiative. So you're not going to land on the perfect scenario where things are perfect, or maybe you will. I'm not sure, but my opinion is that you're already doing the right thing. If you're talking to others, if you're putting your work with questions in front of others, you're already doing progress, and that is the only way to make sure things are going to be understood. Especially because we're all working on IT. We're developing software that we're not going to use. This is my point all along. Like, we're not the users. So how can we define this obviously we have experience with mobile applications, for example, in this case, and there are patterns that are best practice. You have to balance that out. But the best thing about that is that you would be able to see that's part of the research. So, for example, Jose, I ask you, when you're doing this part of the Schlumberger, do you know exactly who is going to use the solution at the end?
I have an idea, but I don't have the chance to like interview them to do that kind of research.
Yeah, I think that's you. I think you and I have discussed about this, but this is so like the risk. It's not an ultimatum. It's not like it's gonna necessarily be the worst thing ever, but we're doing things for the client, which is is a CTO, and we're coming up with the things that we think are okay. But and I think we're doing the best in the context, to be honest. You're again submitting it to other people, having these brainstorm sessions that we have with the creative team, and making sense out of things, questioning things, adding things. I think that's the best thing you can do within the context, because there's a lot of risks. If you don't include users, like in that case, there's a lot of risks, but you're definitely making the best you can. And I think that is what we need to do at all times.